Hello geometry students. I am so happy that you're watching this video. We're going to be starting a new chapter, chapter 3, and I did want to tell you that I feel like this chapter is particularly useful not only for our class but for the work you're all going to be doing next year in advanced algebra. We're going to be learning a few things in particular. There's one pair of angle relationships we're going to introduce today called alternate interior angles that is going to come up a lot next year. And then one of our other sections in this chapter is going to talk about writing equations of lines. And of course, that's something that comes up over and over and over again. So everything, of course, that we do in geometry, we've selected for you to do because it is on your SAT exam. But I just wanted to let you know that this chapter in particular is not only on your SAT exam, but it's going to be a large part of what you do next year. So these notes are going to be hopefully relatively simple. It's going to be more vocabulary versus examples. And then the more concrete examples will come up in lesson 3.2. Now I'm going to be going over 3.1 and 3.2 together because they really do kind of go together, but the notes are separate. So we're going to write at the top of our paper here 3.1 up at the top, and then pairs of lines and angles. Pairs of lines and angles. So like I said, we'll do some vocabulary. Hopefully this won't be too long. And then the next video on 3.2 will have some specific examples using the vocabulary. So one thing I wanted to talk to you about is parallel versus perpendicular lines. Both of those words are words we've kind of discussed in passing in the previous chapter. But just to clarify, two lines are parallel if they never touch. So there are no points of intersection. So that would be just a rough example, for instance, of two parallel lines. In our last lesson, we talked about perpendicular lines. Can you remember what perpendicular lines form? Perpendicular lines form 4 right angles. So they form a 90-degree angle. So we talked about that. There is a new kind of line relationship that we're going to talk about today called skew lines. That's spelled S-K-E-W. And this is kind of hard to demonstrate on a board versus in person. If I was in person, I would use like a Kleenex box or the walls of the room. But skew lines are a little bit like parallel in the sense that they never touch, but they're not on the same plane, so they are not parallel. Let me show you an example here. If I drew my pen through the top of this box, that could be considered to be one line here. If I drew my pen through the bottom of the box, not in the same plane, that line would never end up touching the other line because one's going across the top of the box, the other is going across the bottom, but they're pointing in different directions. So they're not in the same plane. So we call that skew. If they are in the same plane, like these two lines, and they don't touch, we call them parallel. If they don't touch and they're not on the same plane, we call them skew. So those are the 3 basic types of relationships between lines that we've kind of looked at so far. Now, there is a whole other universe of kind of angle line relationships, and that is where we have 2 lines that it doesn't really matter whether they're parallel or not, but they're crossed by another line. We call this other line the transversal. And remember, from our first lesson, I believe it was 1.1, 1.2, when we talk about a line, we use a lowercase italicized letter. So, for example, in this picture that I've drawn here, I have lines M and N crossed by the transversal line L. And notice I've written those lines in lowercase italicized letter. Now, one thing that would be helpful for you to know, or 2 things actually, are the difference between interior and exterior. We did talk about this in the context of an angle, like a point in the interior or exterior. The way I like to remember it is interior means inside, like an interior designer designs the inside of a house. So when we are looking at this picture here and we say interior, we mean between the two lines. If we say exterior, we mean outside the two lines. So we're going to use the words interior and exterior in describing these angles, and it's important that you know what that means. So the first pair I'd like to discuss would be, for example, if I label this angle 1 and maybe angle 8 here. Angle 1 and angle 8 are called alternate exterior. Let's write that down. Angle 1, angle 8, alternate exterior. So alternate means on opposite sides of the transversal. Angle 1 is on the left, angle 8 is on the right, and exterior means on the outside. Now, there are two other angles in this picture that are also alternate exteriors. I'm wondering if you can see where they are. Look on your picture and see if you could pick out, point to on your paper, where would be the other pair of alternate exteriors on this picture. The other pair of alternate exteriors would be angles 2 and 7 here. So angles 2 and angle 7 are also alternate exterior. They are on opposite sides of the transversal and they are outside the two lines. Okay, now we're going to do something kind of similar. Can anyone guess a pair of alternate interiors? Look at the picture, see if you can point on your paper to a pair of alternate interior angles. For example, you could look at angle 3 and angle 6 here. Angle 3 and angle 6 are alternate interior. The reason they're alternate interior is because they're on opposite sides of the transversal, but on the inside. Hopefully you can see that. That looks a little bit, I don't know, a little bit light to me. I'll try to use a darker color for the next one. Can you find the other pair of alternate interiors? There's one other pair here. It would be angles 4 and 5. So angle 4 and angle 5 are also alternate interior. Now, we have two other kinds of relationships that we want to talk about here, and then we'll be done with the 3.1 notes. So these are hopefully relatively short notes. The other vocabulary words that I want us to talk about are called, one of them is called consecutive interior. Try to remember what interior means, inside. And I'm wondering if you've heard of the word consecutive before. Like, okay, you guys know I love to go motorcycle riding. I love to go motorcycle riding on consecutive days. So like Monday and Tuesday, or Saturday and Sunday, or of course Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. But consecutive means in a row, okay? So if we look at the picture here, angle 3 and 5 would be consecutive interiors because they're in a row on the inside. So that would be one pair of consecutive interiors, angle 3 and 5. Can you look at that picture and look down at your notes and see if you can figure out the other pair of consecutive interiors? The other pair of consecutive interiors. I hope you said angles 4 and angle 6. Because angle 4 and 6 are consecutive, which means in a row, and interior, which means on the inside. So we're almost done here. We have one last grouping. It's called corresponding, and this is the hardest one for students to see, corresponding angles. So for that, I'm going to erase the circles that I just finished putting around these consecutive interior numbers. In fact, I think what I'm going to do is just put all of the numbers maybe in black and redo this picture so that it's a little bit easier to see corresponding. I'm going to keep the numbers the same here, but I'll use new colors. Okay, so we're still looking at this basic picture here and at the numbered angles, and we're going to talk about what it means to be corresponding. So basically, two angles are corresponding if they appear in the same place on your picture. So for example, if I want to take a look at angle 1, do you see how it's to the left of my transversal and above one of my two lines? So it would correspond to the angle that is also to the left of the transversal and above one of the lines. So angles 1 and 5 would be considered corresponding. Now I'd like you to look at that picture and see if you can find another pair of angles that you think would be corresponding. There's actually 3 more pairs that you could pick, so there isn't just one right answer. How about if I said 2? Which angle do you think would correspond to 2? The angle we would be looking for would be 6, 2 and 6, because 2 and 6 are both to the right of the transversal and above a line. Okay, let's give this another try. Let's find the angle that would go with 3 if I'm looking for corresponding angles. What angle would correspond to 3? It would be angle 7. So angle 3 and angle 7 would be corresponding. And then the last pair we could look at perhaps would be angle 4 and 8. So angle 4 and angle 8 would also be corresponding. They're in the same part on the diagram. Okay, so this was pretty much a vocabulary lesson. We're going to do 3-1 and 3-2 together because the next lesson is very, very similar to this. It just builds more practical examples in and also uses a special circumstance about the 2 lines, and we'll talk about that next. But for now, you're done with the 3.1 notes. Please, when you're done with this video, turn it off, obviously, and then open up 3.2 because the 2 videos we're going to watch the same time or in the same session. Okay, thanks, you guys. Bye.